We live in a world that constantly bombards us with the idea that we must be perfect. From our appearance to our personal and professional achievements, perfection seems to be the goal of everything. We are flooded with images of ideal lives on social media, of perfect bodies, perfect families, and successful careers. But in reality, what this relentless pursuit of an unrealistic ideal brings us is a growing emptiness and a deep disconnection from our true essence. And this is exactly what Brené Brown questions in her book, The Gifts of Imperfection. The author, who has become a reference in research on vulnerability, shame, and courage, offers us a revolutionary perspective on perfection. Instead of continuing to strive for unattainable standards, she challenges us to accept our imperfections and, more importantly, to celebrate our humanity. What she teaches us is that, by constantly seeking perfection, we are distancing ourselves from who we truly are. Perfection, in fact, traps us and makes us live according to external expectations rather than our inner truth. The first big step Brené Brown suggests is abandoning the pursuit of perfection and accepting our vulnerability. Vulnerability, far from being a sign of weakness, is the key to living authentically. By allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, we are allowing ourselves to be human, with all our flaws, limitations, and uncertainties. Throughout life, we learn that being vulnerable can be uncomfortable and even painful, but it is through this openness that we connect with others in a true and deep way. The author discusses how shame, that feeling of being inadequate, of not being enough, is one of the biggest enemies of our authenticity. Shame prevents us from being who we really are and forces us to hide our imperfections, creating a facade that often suffocates us. When we try to hide our weaknesses, we are, in fact, building a barrier between ourselves and the world around us. The pressure to be perfect generates fear. Fear of being judged, fear of failing, fear of not being accepted. But Brené Brown teaches us that healing comes when we stop trying to please others and start being true to ourselves. This doesn't mean we will settle or stop trying to improve, but that we will cultivate a healthier relationship with ourselves. Accepting our vulnerability, our mistakes, our flaws is, in fact, an act of courage. By acknowledging that we are imperfect, we begin to realize that, deep down, we are all human, and that is what makes us genuine. It is curious because in the society we live in, there is a constant effort to present ourselves impeccably. Social media, for example, is a showcase for the perfect self, where we only share the best moments of our lives. This pressure to maintain a flawless image makes us live in constant comparison, always measuring ourselves against others. And what does this make us feel? Inferior, insecure, and disconnected from our true essence. Brené Brown warns us that when we are focused on being perfect, we lose touch with our true voice, with what really matters to us. Perfection is a mask, and no matter how attractive it may seem, it will never bring us lasting satisfaction. What really brings us peace and joy is being authentic, being who we are without fear of showing our imperfections. Thus, the first essential lesson Brené Brown shares in The Gifts of Imperfection is that the pursuit of perfection pulls us away from our true essence. To live a fuller and more genuine life, we must embrace our vulnerability and accept that, yes, we are imperfect. This acceptance is liberating and allows us to live more authentically, free from the shackles of shame and constant comparison. The journey to authenticity begins precisely when we let go of the pressure to be perfect and allow our true essence to manifest without fear. In the second part of The Gifts of Imperfection, Brené Brown invites us to explore the concept of self-compassion, which becomes a fundamental pillar for those who wish to live more authentically and without the constraints of perfection. For her, self-compassion is the ability to treat ourselves with the same kindness, patience, and understanding that we would offer a good friend who is going through difficulties. And this practice becomes even more essential when we begin to look at shame and the destructive role it plays in our lives. Shame, as Brené teaches us, is a deeply human emotion and at the same time, one of the most painful. It makes us feel that we are not good enough, that we are unworthy of love, acceptance, or success. This feeling can arise from different experiences: a public failure, a criticism we received, or even societal standards that often put us in a position of constant comparison. Shame makes us believe that we have no value, and it prevents us from being authentic, as we hide behind a mask of perfection. For Breen, shame is not an isolated emotion, but a force that prevents us from living freely. To combat shame, we need self-compassion. Instead of punishing or harshly judging ourselves when we make mistakes, self-compassion teaches us to recognize our failure with understanding and kindness. Breen shares that, often, when we face our mistakes or failures, our immediate reaction is severe self-criticism. We tell ourselves things like, "I'm not good enough," "I failed again," "I'll never make it," when, in reality, what we need is the same empathy we would offer. This is a crucial point in the transformation proposed in the book. Constant self-criticism and the feeling of shame prevent us from evolving, growing, and learning from our mistakes. When, instead of criticizing ourselves, we choose to be kind to ourselves, we open ourselves to true transformation. This doesn't mean we should ignore our mistakes or failures, but that we should see them as opportunities for learning. When we practice self-compassion, we recognize that making mistakes is part of our journey, and that it doesn't define who we are. In fact, it is our ability to learn and grow from our failures that makes us stronger and more authentic. Moreover, Breen challenges us to free ourselves from the need for external approval. We live in a society where recognition from others is often more important than our own approval. The constant search for external validation, whether in work, personal life, or on social media, leads us to a life of performance, where we are not ourselves, but what we believe others expect us to be. This creates a disconnection between who we really are and what we show the world. Instead of seeking validation from others, what we need to do is turn our gaze inward and approve ourselves for who we are, with all our imperfections. Self-compassion helps us understand that the deepest love and acceptance must come from within. When we begin to approve and accept ourselves, the need for external approval diminishes, and we begin to live more lightly, more truthfully, and more aligned with our essence. This journey of self-compassion is also related to our ability to forgive ourselves. Often, we carry the weight of past mistakes and decisions that were not the best. This emotional burden can paralyze us, making it difficult to move forward. But Brené Brown reminds us that true healing comes when we are able to release guilt and regret. When we practice self-compassion, we allow ourselves the opportunity to forgive ourselves and understand that we are human and therefore fallible. This forgiveness is not a form of justifying our mistakes, but a recognition that we are in a constant process of learning and growth. An important aspect of this journey of self-compassion is also community. While self-compassion is an individual practice, Breen emphasizes that we cannot ignore the power of human connections. As we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and authentic, we also open space for others to do the same. When we share our flaws and imperfections, we create a space of acceptance, where others can also feel safe to do the same. This strengthens human bonds and creates a network of mutual support that is essential for our emotional health. It's important to understand that self-compassion is not something that is achieved once and for all, but a continuous process. Every day we are challenged by new situations, new failures, and new learnings. And the key to moving forward with authenticity is practicing self-compassion every day, with ourselves and with others. It is when we accept our imperfections and treat ourselves with kindness that we can live a fuller and truer life, free from the chains of shame and self-criticism. Brené Brown invites us to transform our relationship with shame and self-criticism, not as something we should eradicate, but as something we can learn to deal with empathy, self-compassion, and acceptance. By doing so, we get closer to our true essence and can live more authentically, truthfully, and with more courage. In the final part of the Gifts of Imperfection, Brené Brown leads us to understand that, to live an authentic life, we need to cultivate courage. The courage to be who we are without the mask of perfection or others' expectations. Courage, according to Breen, is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. She teaches us that by embracing our vulnerability and our imperfections, we open the way for a more authentic and meaningful life. One of the biggest lessons in the book is that, to be authentic, we need to be willing to face our vulnerability. For many of us, vulnerability is something to be avoided at all costs, as we associate vulnerability with weakness, failure, and rejection. However, Breen challenges us to see vulnerability in a completely different way, as a powerful means of connection and an opportunity to grow and learn. Being vulnerable does not mean being weak, but being brave enough to expose our true emotions, fears, and needs. Vulnerability is the place where true connection happens. It is when we show up for others in our entirety, with our mistakes, insecurities, and fears, that we find true intimacy and the ability to create genuine bonds. The courage to be vulnerable allows us to stop living according to external expectations and start living according to what really matters to us. From this place of vulnerability, we are able to explore and embrace who we truly are. Furthermore, Brené Brown emphasizes that authenticity is not an easy practice, especially in a world where we are constantly bombarded by external expectations and perfection standards. Society often tells us what we should do, how we should be, and what we must achieve to be considered successful or worthy of love. These standards pressure us to hide who we really are, creating a deep disconnection between our true essence and how we present ourselves to the world. To live authentically, we need to be willing to challenge these expectations and free ourselves from the pressures that shape us. True authenticity comes from living in harmony with our deepest values, not with what others expect from us. This involves a process of self-discovery, where it is necessary to ask difficult questions, look inward, and commit to living according to the answers, no matter how challenging they may be. Breen also invites us to adopt the idea of imperfection as a gift. Instead of fighting against our flaws, she suggests that we should accept them as a fundamental part of our journey. Our imperfections are what make us unique and human. When we accept our imperfection, we stop relentlessly seeking perfection and, instead, begin to value the small failures and moments of vulnerability as sources of learning and growth. This helps us cultivate a richer, truer life, more connected to what truly matters. Another important concept Breen addresses is the idea of engagement with life, something that is only possible when we decide to be truly authentic. When we free ourselves from the need to please others or to achieve impossible standards, we gain space to be more present, more connected, and more involved with the world around us. This doesn't mean we should abandon responsibilities or commitments, but rather engage with life in a fuller and more genuine way, without the constant fear of failure or rejection. Courage to live authentically is also deeply linked to our sense of belonging. Often, we seek belonging in groups or environments that force us to hide our true essence, so we can be accepted. However, as Breen teaches us, true belonging happens when we feel accepted for who we are, not for a version of ourselves we try to create to please others. True belonging doesn't depend on being perfect or meeting external expectations. It depends on our ability to be vulnerable, to show ourselves as we are, and to accept our imperfection. Finally, Brené Brown reminds us that throughout this journey of self-discovery and acceptance, we are not alone. We are all human beings navigating a world of challenges and uncertainties, but the beauty lies in learning to walk together in our vulnerability and authenticity. By embracing our imperfection, practicing self-compassion, and cultivating the courage to be true, we create a more empathetic, open, and connected world. Living authentically is a continuous process, not a goal to be reached. It requires practice, patience, and above all, courage. Courage to show vulnerability. Courage to love ourselves despite our imperfections. And courage to live according to the deepest values that define us. When we allow ourselves to be authentic, we open ourselves to a richer, more meaningful life, full of genuine connections. So remember, your gifts of imperfection are exactly what you need to live a full and authentic life. When you stop hiding behind a facade and begin showing up as you truly are, the world will become a more welcoming place for you, and for everyone around you. This is what it means to live truthfully, with courage, and an open heart for all the possibilities life has to